I love the idea of the generalist, especially as described by David Epstein in his excellent book Range: Why Generalists Succeed in a Specialist World. I like to think of myself as a generalist. I love trivia, I love problem solvings, I love borrowing ideas from fields where I'm not an expert. And I like to apply that to problems that I have in my world. I think it's actually a huge unlock that generalists have AI tools today. AI is an incredible technology. It knows and understands concepts and topics at a very deep level. AI models are incredible specialists. They are also incredible at finding patterns in data and relating ideas to others. And now, and for now, they need you to ask questions for them, tell them what to do. So in my view of the world, broadly split into two types of people, the specialist and the generalist. I think the generalist has an unfair advantage when using AI systems. The specialist has narrow focus. They like to go deep on problems, and that's great. And a specialist using AI can unlock incredible depth of understanding. But we do not have great data showing that contemporary AI models can unlock new, novel science. So there is this limit to how deep a specialist with AI can go. And I would say, if anything, the rate of advancement is likely limited by real-world constraints. When you have a new idea, you have to test it with real data and experiments, and that's what's slowing that system down, right? Is an AI can't do all those experiments yet. So it's slowed down by the real-world constraints. But I think that that's coming, and I think it will be very transformational, but it's going to be slower by default. But where the true unlock of today is unleashing the generalist. So a generalist is someone that has domain expertise. They know enough to solve problems, but they have a very curious mind. They like to look for ways to bring together disparate ideas. And this is where today's AI are absolute beasts. They allow a generalist to pull at threads of tangential and orthogonal ideas, finding problems with similar shapes but different domains, and then using AI to tie it together. The generalist can go as deep as they need now with AI's help to synthesize new ideas by combining the old. It's like we're mining all that old stuff. It's the standing on the shoulder of giants. So this borrows proven concepts from other fields, and it helps you drill down with them. So if a couple years ago a generalist was limited by his depth of knowledge across multiple domains, it was quite likely that they were looking for answers to problems they had in domains where they just had a like a very top level understanding of. It was still very useful, but today the generalist with AI can find these relationships much more easily. So instead of looking at related ideas at a top level, you can find related ideas at a deeper level. So a simple example, a current problem that I'm working with is how to use remote sensing techniques to help assess and monitor vegetation health, particularly from the perspective of reclaimed oil and gas leases on annual and perennial cropland. So I have over a decade of field experience looking at these sites in the field, understanding the benefits and limitations and the constraints of doing things the traditional way. But as I started learning about multispectral imaging with drones and satellites, I could see obvious improvements and new opportunities. I could see the density of data available, how the power of statistics could start to help understand variations of fields and crop health, of comparing one area to another. But I didn't know the statistical framework behind what I wanted to do. So I started doing this in earnest in 2021, just with Google searches. Like many people, I didn't have much of a background in stats. I took a couple classes in university. I did not enjoy them, didn't do well. They were too abstract. I had no application for the things I was learning. And I'll be blunt, the subject of statistics is huge. It's enormous, it's very nuanced. My Google searches were quite fruitless because I couldn't find examples that fit my niche. I didn't know enough about stats to search for the equivalent ideas in adjacent fields of work. But with the advent of ChatGPT, I began to describe the problems I was having and what I was trying to do. I was having a hard time figuring out how to compare the vegetation health trends of a field over 2 years because the crop type was different. You know, it's canola one year, it's wheat the next year. They both have different the crops have different amount of greenness in them, even when they're healthy. Not to mention that, one year was drier than the next, so the entire field was less healthy. So in my head, I knew that it was not important to know what NDVI values were for each pixel across this area. What I cared about was which areas were better or worse than the rest of the field, which areas were better or worse than the average. What if I could do that in terms of standard deviation? Because I knew that in a somewhat normal distribution like NDVI, I knew that standard deviation would be a pretty good way of determining how important a change was. So with some iteration back and forth, I figured out that this is actually a very common and very simple statistical technique called z-scores. I just needed to do a z-score transformation of the NDVI raster, and I would have a way to look at crop vegetation health data, which was data defined, comparable over time, and accounted for crop type, temperature, and precipitation changes, etc., based on the local comparison. So I'm guessing that depending on who you are reading this, listening to this, you're either thinking that what the heck is a NDVI raster, or what the heck is a z-score, or who doesn't know that z-scores are the easiest way to standardize data like this? And that is exactly my point. If you're standing outside of these domains, it sounds like you're reading Greek. If you're standing inside these domains, what I'm describing as a breakthrough is actually what first-year students are taught. But together, these two ideas can combine and solve a real problem that I have, which is worth solving. So now with current AI reasoning models, this generalist skill is supercharged even more. And what a gory damn great time to be alive. The last thing that I wanted to get across today was that many ideas sound good at a high level, but what can be hard to do is to see if they actually work. The ideation can be the easiest part of this whole process. And for years, I was full of bright ideas that piled up in notebooks, and they still sit there to this day. So what I think is perhaps even a bigger unlock is being a generalist and letting AI unlock coding for you. At this moment in time, AI is amazingly capable in many subjects, but is arguably the best at coding. Coding can be tested. Software is written to do a thing on a computer, and then it can be ran to see if that thing worked. If it did the thing, the code worked. If it did not do the thing, the code did not work. AI can propose a solution, run it, see if it worked or not, and iterate until the thing works. It can validate itself. It can validate the output. And do not take this superpower for granted. Software applies to so many domains. It can supercharge you because it can help you bring your ideas into the real world and see if they worked. My z-score example from above sounds great in theory, but instead of just jotting it down in a notebook, I told ChatGPT to explain the process to me, to write down some code, to do a z-score transformation on an NDVI raster. Then I loaded it in QGIS, and I was able to see if the results matched my interpretation and my field experience. This software meets domain expert is such a good example that I couldn't stop thinking of this Paul Graham essay I'd read. Paul Graham is the co-founder of Y Combinator, a Silicon Valley startup incubator. And in the essay, How to Get Startup Ideas, he brings up a lot of great points. But he makes them from a perspective of someone from Silicon Valley, where software engineers and computer science grads are everywhere, and they're looking to come up with new ideas. One key idea is that if you can hack, you can write code. So you can go from merely thinking it's an interesting idea to instead thinking that's an interesting idea. I'm going to build an initial version tonight. So that's a quote from his essay. This is essentially what I was trying to say above. Paul just does a good job of saying it. But I think the next paragraph in his essay is even more important, especially if we flip the perspective. So what Paul says is, the clash of domains is particularly fruitful source of ideas. If you know a lot about programming and you start learning some other field, you'll probably see problems that software could solve. In fact, you're doubly likely to find good problems in another domain if A, the inhabitants of the domain are not as likely as software people. The inhabitants of the domain are not as likely as software people to have already solved their problems with software. And B, since you come into that new domain totally ignorant, you don't even know what the status quo is to take for granted. And I would say, let's take that idea and flip it on its head. Software used to require incredible domain expertise in order to leverage it, so much that Paul suggests going out to dabble in the world to find problems that software can solve. But the situation we are now facing is reversed. AI can write code very, very, very well. So as domain experts, the best thing you can do is to try to figure out what problems you have in your niche that can be solved with software, but never have been, because it's been too niche of a problem, or because people with software experience didn't even know there was a problem worth solving. This is the future. There are huge productivity efficiencies, new domain unlocks that will be unleashed because experts can now write their own code. If you're reading this, I encourage you to use your AI model of choice to try to give shape to the problems you're trying to solve. Use AI to try to crystallize those problems into things that can be solved by adjacent domains. Play with ideas. Play with AI. Get AI to write your first piece of software. Try Anthropic's Claude to make an artifact for you, or better yet, go to Replit and ask the Replit agent to build you something. Pick something simple and see what it can do. Keep pushing that bar. I think you'll be surprised at how easy it is to be a generalist and how amazing it feels to bring an idea to life with software. My catchphrase these days is, you can just do things. So that's my thought on why it's so important to be a generalist right now and all the opportunity out there. And it really comes down to take your domain and look at neighboring things, hopefully leverage code, solve problems that you have, and start there, and it only goes up. So thanks for listening with me for this long, and I hope to share some more of my thoughts like this.